morning, Judson University. My name is John. How y'all doing this morning? Good. I never know how to start these things, you know? I know I probably should. I know it's kind of my job or whatever, but, and here's the thing, I always tell myself that I'm going to. I always tell myself I'm going to figure out, a really smart or really clever or really funny intro to my sermon. And then I get up here and I realize, oh crap, I forgot to do it again. But I think we all have things like that, right? And if this is my thing, it's not that bad, you know? For me, I avoid writing openings to my sermons. But you avoid going to the dentist, you know? You just do. Mine isn't that bad. I don't want to write a clever intro to these messages. But you don't want to call your mom as often as she wants you to. I know you don't, because I don't call mine either, you know? For me, I still don't know, how I'm going to start this thing, and you still text and drive. So, who's more dangerous, me or you? Me or you? But don't we, come on, we all have those things, right? We all have things that we know we probably should do, but we kind of put them off, we neglect them. Or we have things that we know we probably shouldn't do. They're dangerous, they're not good for us, and yet, if you look at our lives, we kind of do those things a lot, don't we? And that's actually what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about one of those things today. You all have been in this series called Fake News. And over the last several weeks, you've been diving into these unspoken narratives, these sort of unwritten rules in our culture. And we've been talking about how the Bible, the story of the Bible, it actually offers a counter narrative to all of that. The Bible offers us a different way of relating to or thinking about or living in the world. And the sort of foundation for this sort of new way of living and this countercultural way of living is founded in the Ten Commandments, which you've been kind of walking through these commandments one by one. And today we reach commandment number 4. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 gives us the fourth of 10 commandments. And it says, remember what's the next word? Sabbath day, and keep it holy. Now, I'm not sure where you're at in terms of your faith sitting here this morning. I'm sure there's some of you would consider yourself to be a Christian. You're a person of faith. You're a church person. Others of you, you're just here because your coach told you. You're just here because you want to get credit, right? I'm not sure, and I'm not really here to judge. I think it's fantastic that you showed up this morning. But if you know anything about the Sabbath, like if you have just a basic understanding of that word Sabbath, you would probably say that it's what? It is a day off, right? Or a day of rest. And that's right. That is the basic idea of this commandment. But you should also know that this commandment is actually very unique from any of the other 9 in several ways. Number one, this is the only practice among the 10. You see, all the other commandments are things that you should always do or things that you should never do. Whereas with the Sabbath, there's a timeline to it. There's a certain time and there's a certain way in which we engage in this practice. Another thing, scholars have also noted over the years that the first 3 commandments in the 10, they all have to do with our relationship with God. Whereas the last 6 all have to do with our relationship to other people. And this 4th command of the Sabbath is sort of the bridge between the two. That's a little Bible nerdy stuff for you. But for me, I actually believe that the thing that makes the Sabbath most unique, why this is kind of the most unique commandment above all the other 9, is that we actually don't believe it. Here's what I mean. If you were to sit down with any Christian and you were to ask them if they believe the 10 commandments, they'd probably tell you that they believe them, right? And they probably tell you that they do their best to obey them. Come on, this is Christianity 101. It's like a faith gen ed course, you know? It's this is the basic minimum requirement to be a Christian. Follow these rules. But if you actually look at our lives, if you actually look at how committed we are to busyness, to constant activity, constant work, constant consumption, and if you look at how exhausted we are as a result of it, some of you, you're only 3 weeks into school, and you are so tired already. If you actually look at our lives, you will see that we do not actually believe in 10 commandments. But I heard one pastor recently say, we believe in 9 commandments and one really strong suggestion. I mean, think about it this way. Like if I were to break any of the other 10 commandments, right? If I were to kill somebody, or if I were to cheat on my wife, or if I were to steal money from this school, chances are I'm not getting invited back to speak at chapel. You know what I mean? Like I probably lost this gig. But if I work 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, if I never rest because the devil never rests, right? If I never take a day off, I will actually be celebrated for that. My career as a speaker, it would thrive in Christian culture. You see, this idea of Sabbath or our propensity to neglect rest, it is like texting and driving in our culture. We know we shouldn't do it. We know it's dangerous, and yet we do it anyway. And if we continue to do it, if we continue to neglect rest, it's probably going to take us getting into a massive crash in order for us to actually stop and change. And so what we're going to do this morning is we're actually going to look at what exactly this Sabbath is. It's sort of an old school word that many of us, perhaps we don't have an understanding of what it is, or we only have a surface level understanding. Because here's the thing, my hope is that you'll begin to see that this practice, it is not just ancient, but this is a necessary practice for your life. Whether you consider yourself to be a Christian or not, this is a necessary practice because I believe that the practice of Sabbath, it actually has the power to transform every area of your life. And not only that, but I actually believe that a return to Sabbath actually has the power to challenge and transform our world. And so, if you have a Bible with you, that's great. Open it up to this passage in Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. What we're going to be doing this morning is we're going to be looking at a few different passages in Scripture where the Sabbath is sort of established or commanded. And each one of these passages, it actually gives us a different lens. It gives us kind of a different way of looking at the Sabbath and the implications that this practice can have in our lives. But we start in Exodus chapter 20, where God is giving Moses, the leader of his people, the 10 commandments that we've been talking about. And by the way, sometimes I need a little help reading, so when I pause, I just kind of need you to say the next word for me. Can you do that? Just nod your head. Great, some of you can do that. Awesome. So, Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy." Then what's the next word? 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But on the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. The first thing that I want us to understand about the Sabbath this morning is that the Sabbath is rhythm. Have you ever noticed, or maybe you were taught in a high school science class, that there is an order to the universe? A really popular image among physicists is this idea that our universe balances on a razor's edge. Maybe you've heard this before. An example of this, we know that our universe is ever expanding. Meaning we are seeing new stars and new planets, new galaxies popping up every single day. But here's the interesting thing. The rate at which our universe is expanding, it is so precise that scientists believe that if it were to alter just a tiny bit, if it were to speed up or slow down by even 1/1000th of a percent, scientists believe the universe would actually explode or collapse. Let me be clear here. 0.0001% change, no more stars, no more planets, no more intelligent life. You see, there is a definite order and design and rhythm to our universe. And what I think is so crazy is that long before we ever had telescopes or satellites, long before the invention of physics, the author of Exodus understood this. That there is a rhythm to creation, this idea of work 6 days, rest 1. Work 6 days, rest 1. That's how God designed it. Author and pastor A.J. Swoboda, he likes to say, we worship the God who created the weekend. If you're in here and you're doubting the goodness of God, that is all the proof you need, people. Come on. And so here's the thing. For us, and for these Israelites living 3,000 years ago, when we hear these 10 commandments, what we have to understand is that a big part of living as God's people, a big part of following God is submitting to God's design, submitting to God's order, his way of doing things in the world. Or you might think about it this way. Living as God's people means living by God's plan. It's as simple as that. Living as God's people in the world, what it means living by his rhythm, his order, his design for the world. And so I want you to consider something for a minute. I wonder if the reason that it feels like the world is falling apart right now, I wonder if the reason we have environmental issues that are threatening our existence as a species, I wonder if the reason that things like depression and stress and suicide are at an all-time high, I wonder if the reason it feels like your life is falling apart and you are so tired all the time and you don't even know why, I wonder if the reason it feels like the universe is exploding is because we have actually altered God's design for our lives by simply neglecting his rhythm of work and rest. I wonder how much we could fix in our world if we would just return to God's design, his rhythm of Sabbath. Walter Brueggemann says that people who practice the Sabbath live all 7 days differently. You see, here's the thing. What Sabbath does is it gets us back in rhythm. It gets us back in rhythm with God and creation. And by the way, this is the rhythm that you were created and designed to live in. When you give yourself to the Sabbath, your whole life begins to thrive. But let's be honest. This ain't the rhythm of our world, is it? Like, this is not the rhythm of the culture that we live in, you know? Our world, we live by what I like to call Rihanna theology. It's just work, 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 you know? Come on. Like, the unwritten rule, the unspoken narrative of our world is stay on your hustle, right? The unwritten rule is get up and grind. You are what you can achieve. Your work defines your worth. And so here's the thing. If you want to thrive in this world, if you want to even survive in this world, well, then you better get up at 5 a.m. You better get to the gym. You better get straight A's. You better post an awesome photo. You better know what's going on in the world. You also better have an opinion about what's going on in the world. You know? Here's the thing. You want to thrive in this world, you got to buy that new thing. You got to get a second job. You got to watch that show so you're not left out of the conversation. You got to join another school activity. You got to start another Bible study. Work, 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 work. Someone in this room is triggered right now because that is what your life feels like all the time, isn't it? Constantly. I have to do this. I have to do that. My to-do list is never done. I want you to turn in your Bibles to Deuteronomy chapter 5. Deuteronomy chapter 5. The book of Deuteronomy, it is basically just one long speech given by Moses to the Israelites when they are actually on the brink of entering into the promised land. And what Moses is doing in this speech is he's sort of reminding these people of their story. And so what he does towards the beginning of the speech is he reminds them of those 10 commandments that God gave them years ago in the book of Exodus at Mount Sinai. But I'm going to read this to you. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to listen closely to this reading. And I want you to just tell me what you notice about this reading of the 10 Commandments. To Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 12. It says, "Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your town, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath." What did you notice? It's different, isn't it? You see, in Exodus, the text it calls upon the creation story as a reason for Sabbath. But in Deuteronomy, the text calls upon the Exodus story. The people's liberation from slavery in Egypt, that's a reason to Sabbath. Why would Moses tell them to remember when they were slaves in Egypt as a reason to take a Sabbath? Well, as you may have learned in Old Testament survey, 3,000 years ago, Egypt was the global superpower of the day. And Pharaoh was the leader of Egypt. He was the leader of this empire. And just like any empire, the sign of power for Egypt was to have more, to build more, to control more, to consume more. But unlike today, work was not a source of pride for the powerful. In fact, in the ancient world, the more power you had, the less you worked because you had people to work for you. You had slaves. And Pharaoh had the Hebrew people. And here's the thing about a slave. A slave doesn't get a day off, do they? No. A slave's only purpose is what they can produce. A slave's only value is in what he or she can do. And so for hundreds of years, these Hebrew people, they have been enslaved to a socioeconomic system that has been defined by work, do, produce. More, more, more. And then so here in Deuteronomy, Moses is saying to these people as a reminder that you no longer live in that system, as a reminder that you are no longer a slave to the ideology of more, observe the Sabbath. You see, for the people then, and for us today, the Sabbath is so much more. Yes, in Exodus we learn that the Sabbath, it is rhythm. But in Deuteronomy we learn that the Sabbath is resistance. Again, for the people then and for us today, the Sabbath, it's so much more than just taking a day off once a week. Because let's be honest with each other. The reality is, we live in Egypt. Like, come on. It's so obvious. We live in the more obsessed global superpower of our day, don't we? And so, in our stay on your hustle culture, in our you are what you achieve, your work defines your worth culture, I cannot think of a more subversive, countercultural lifestyle than the practice of Sabbath. Can you? Another quote from A.J. Swoboda that I love. He says, "The Sabbath steps on every idol that America worships." You see, here's the thing. When we in our culture today, when we take a day and we cease from our work, when we take a day and we cease from striving, when we cease and we say, I'm not going to do any homework today, I'm not going to study for that test today, or when we say, no, I'm not going to go out, I'm not going to go on my phone, when we say, no, I don't need better grades, I don't need another photo, no, I'm going to stop. I'm going to rest. When we do that in our culture, actually what we're saying is I'm not a slave to this system. What we're saying is, I do not serve Pharaoh. I actually serve a different king altogether. See, the Sabbath, it is one of the simplest and yet most profound ways that we can live in opposition, in resistance to our culture of more. And we can actually showcase the goodness of God, not by working, not by being so great up here on stage, but simply by taking a step back and resting and saying, my God actually believes that I'm enough. I don't need to earn that love. Some very practical ways for me that I use the Sabbath as resistance, because I know this is a big idea, so let's make it practical for you. One, I put on my out of office when I'm on Sabbath. Meaning, if you send me an email when I'm on Sabbath, you will get an automatic reply that says, I'm taking a Sabbath, I'm not going to answer my email, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Very practical, but it's just one way that I remind myself I'm not a slave to my inbox. I'm not a slave to the people who show up in my inbox. Another thing I do, I don't check social media on the Sabbath. Gasp, I know. You can do it. And please hear me. I'm not saying that social media or your phone is bad. No, please. What I'm saying is on the Sabbath, what I try and do is I try and avoid places and spaces that would cause me to desire what I don't have rather than delight in what I do have. Because that's what the Sabbath is for. Another thing I do, I go idle on my idols. For me, it's things like working out. It's usually things like writing or creating. Usually it's ministry work. This is good stuff. But often I struggle with making it the ultimate thing. And so just once a week, I go idle on it. I go idle on it as a reminder to myself that I am not a slave to this system. I take a break from anything that threatens to drag me back into slavery to it. And I want to be clear with you. I'm up here, I'm teaching you this as a newbie, okay? I'm not an expert on this. To be totally honest with you, I have only been taking this practice seriously just for a few months now. And I know that when you're teaching a sermon on rest, you're supposed to talk about how transformative it's been for your life, and like, ever since I took on the Sabbath, I'm so enlightened and I'm so zen, and I don't even know my own thoughts. And while doing this practice, it's been really good for me. I'd rather tell you about my last Sabbath. My last Sabbath, y'all, was awful. It was like the least restful day of my entire life. And I tried, right? But everyone just they kept texting me, and I had to run 4 errands because I just forgot about things. And my wife and I, we had this really nice, romantic, restful evening planned, and she forgot she had to go into work. So I was just alone, and I got on my laptop by the end of it. I just gave up. And I was sitting there, and I was so frustrated, right? I was like, oh, God, I'm trying so hard to Sabbath. And then I stopped, and I was like, oh, crap. I have just added the Sabbath to my list of things to do. It has just become another thing for me to achieve, another thing for me to succeed at, rather than a free gift that God has graciously given me. I want to show you one more thing about the Sabbath. Turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2, the very, very beginning. In the beginning, Genesis 1, God creates the world in what? 6 days, and then he rests on the 7th day. There is a rhythm, right? A rhythm to rest. Now, many of you may know, on day 1, God creates light. On day 4, God creates stars. And then on day 6, what does God create? God creates humans. He creates us, Adam and Eve. And then Genesis chapter 2 begins this way. It says, by the 7th day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. On the 7th day, God rested from all his work. This, on page 2 of the Bible, this is the first Sabbath. Now, I want to show you something that blew my mind. So let's review that. On day 6, God creates humans. Day 7 is a day of rest, which means that for Adam and Eve, their very first day of existence was a Sabbath. Which means that before they ever did anything, before they ever did God's will by subduing the earth, by working the ground, before they were ever fruitful and multiplied, before they do a thing, God invites them to rest. This is the gospel. This is actually the first picture of the gospel message that we receive in Scripture. Not that you work and work and work in order to earn your rest, but actually it is because of the work that God has done for you. It's because of the work that Christ has done for you on the cross, then you are invited into that rest. It's not that you are loved by God once you work really hard to earn it for yourself. No. That is fake news. But the bold declaration that you were loved by God before you worked, you were loved by God before you ever did a thing, that is good news. You see, the Sabbath, it is the natural rhythm that we are called to live in. The Sabbath, it is resistance to the empires of our world, but more than anything, the Sabbath is rest. The Sabbath, it is this unearned, undeserved, and yet freely given gift of rest with God. And again, it's not something that we get because we've earned it. But once a week, we are called to remember that we do not work in order to earn our rest, but we rest because of the work that God has done through Jesus for us. This is the heart of the Sabbath. Now, I want to get really practical with you in the few minutes that I have left, because here's the thing. This practice, it does not have to be complicated. I know that your life is busy. I know you got a lot going on. I know you have a lot of commitments. But can I just say in all humility, I love you so much, you're not as important as you think. You know what was the most incredible thing the first time I took a Sabbath? When I woke up the next day, everyone was fine. They actually didn't miss me as much as I thought. What I do for the world, while I believe it's important, while I believe that God uses me, I am not God. And so here's what I want to do. In order to put this practice into your life, it doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be consistent. And so in order for you to do this, you just got to remember the things we've been talking about. Number one, the Sabbath is rhythm. That means one day a week. It can be Saturday, it can be Sunday. If you have a consistent schedule, choose a day. For me, my schedule, it is anything but consistent. And so my Sabbath, it changes week to week. But you better believe it's on my calendar. I got a notification at 9 a.m. from my iPhone this morning. Tomorrow, Sabbath. It's on my calendar because I'm committed to living in God's designed rhythm for my life. Second thing, the Sabbath is resistance. And here's the thing, oftentimes we can get legalistic about this. We can be like, well, what exactly am I allowed to do? John, what exactly constitutes work on the Sabbath? What does that mean? This was a huge debate in Jesus' day as well, okay? And in the early portions of Mark, Jesus actually speaks to this debate in such a beautiful and simple way. He asks the question to the Pharisees. He says, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? What Jesus is saying here, he's saying the Sabbath, it is a day for giving life and for doing good. And so when I find myself having a debate, like, should I watch Netflix? Can I go for a jog? I simply ask myself that question. Is this activity that I'm about to engage in, is this life-giving or is it life-taking? Does doing this thing, does it lead me into rest or does it actually lead me back into slavery? And by the way, that answer, it's probably going to be different depending on who you are. It's going to be different depending on the activity. It might even change week to week. But what we have to remember is that what the Sabbath does is it challenges each and every one of us to pause however we may need and to rest from our work. Again, not because of our work, but because of the work that God has done for us. And so to finish our time together, I actually want to borrow the words of Jesus and read them over you as sort of a benediction. And what I want this to be, I want it to serve as a reminder to you, a reminder that there's a different way than the way of the empire. I just want to take a minute as we finish up to speak to someone in the room who 3 weeks into school and you're already exhausted. You're already sure how you're not going to make it through the semester. I just want to say right to you, there's a different way than the rundown, burnt out way that you are living right now. Jesus actually, he cares about how tired you are. And he actually offers you a different story, a story that is not based on you have to earn it or you have to do more and then you're accepted. But Jesus offers us this story of grace that says, come and rest. And so I'll ask that if you wouldn't mind, if you want to stand right now, right where you are, if you're able, and you can take whatever posture you want. If you want to close your eyes, put your hands out in front of you as sort of a posture of, I'm going to receive this gift, this beautiful, wonderful gift of rest that Jesus is giving me. I'm going to read this over you. This is from Matthew chapter 11. This is the Message version. And this just speaks right to my heart. This is Jesus speaking. He says, are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? And he says, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. I love this part. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. The Sabbath says you are enough because the God that is enough made you. And so this week, may you go and experience the free gift of Sabbath. May you go and experience the wonderful gift of rest in Jesus. Judson University, thank you so much for having me. I love you. You're out of here 50 seconds early. Praise God. Love you all.